Hello, my name is Vic Gilgis, and I'm attempting here to make another podcast, which hopefully will help you with your issues, your well-being. That's what they are about, your happiness, etc., contentment, whatever you want to call it, just feeling better. Oh. Right, so get started. During the week, I went to the pictures. I love going to the pictures, big screen and all the rest of it. I went to see Disney's Snow White. And that is a classic from late 20s, I think, 1928. I can't remember. But it is a classic. But I must admit, this itself was a classic. It was great. I really enjoyed watching it. And what struck me in particular, and obviously that's why it's such a classic, because I think it strikes other people, is the part where the Wicked Witch looks in the mirror and says, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And there's a lot in that. And the reason I'm going on about this is that earlier in the week I'd listened to a podcast, an Amy Johnston Changeable podcast, where she did with a session with Piers Thurston, and it was called "All of Life is a Mirror." Yeah, so that's the connection. So I've got that out of the way. And so I suppose what this session is about is to do with what we can get out of the mirror analogy and our issues going poof, basically, because they certainly didn't with the Wicked Witch. Now, let me just explain this. When the Wicked Witch looks in the mirror and asks the question, "Who's the fairest of them all?" and the mirror keeps saying, "Oh, you are, you're lovely," and she's happy, then later on, the princess comes on the scene, and again, the Wicked Witch keeps asking the mirror, etc., who is the fairest? And then the mirror replies, "You are not the fairest. There is one in the kingdom apart from you who is the fairest," and that is obviously Snow White. Now, I had a lot of thoughts on this, and of course it resonated with that podcast. And I think there's a lot of lessons there to be learned, because in looking at the mirror, taking for example the specific example of the Wicked Witch, and again, generally I would say it depends who is looking in the mirror. If you're looking in the mirror or I'm looking in the mirror, we all see different things. But the thing about the Wicked Witch looking in the mirror is that she was looking in the mirror to ask a question because she felt insecure. She felt that there was something better than her, and she was asking, "Surely I am the best, and I want you to reinforce that and make me feel better." So that's what's going on when we look in the mirror, is that we, in this kind of analogy here, is that we, that's what I mean by it depends who's looking in the mirror, because if the Wicked Witch had have not been so insecure, she would not have been looking in the mirror and asking that question. And as a matter of fact, what made me laugh was that the Wicked Witch, I thought, was quite hot in comparison to Snow White, who was a bit girly, I thought, the way it was all portrayed. But, that's my misogynistic view of the week. She certainly had nothing, according to watching that film, to be frightened of, but she was frightened of. She was frightened of as. Now, this is making a big point, is that when we're up in our head with our psychology about us and them, and I call that the duality, there's a me that we think of, our beliefs, our likes, dislikes, our worries, our comparisons, and what is going out, there's us and them, and how do we compare against them? Well, that is dualism. And when you come to non-dualism, and I sorry to get I'll try and expand this a little bit later. But in spiritual terms, the real me, the real you, is okay, is not insecure. Like the wicked witch, really, inside, although she couldn't see it, was actually okay. But she was coming from a place of insecurity. And one of the points I'm making here is that when we do come from a place of insecurity, and a lot of us, when we're up in our head about issues and problems and situations, we are coming from lack. And is that the right place? It's like, if you were going somewhere, where would you start? I said, well, you wouldn't start from here. You wouldn't start from a place of insecurity. When in actual fact, your starting point can always be from your place of security and okayness and rightness. That is actually us, the real us inside. And that begged another question here. And that's why I'll relate it now, that film and what I've just said. I think I've said what I want to say about to the podcast that I mentioned earlier. I listened to the podcast twice. To me, I had to, because it was quite deep and complex, I thought. But the more I listened, the more I understood, I think. And some brilliant points were made by both Amy Johnson and this Piers Thurston. And some of the things that were being brought up was that there is a difference between what is real and what is true. And now that might sound like kind of a mincing up words here, but I think what is being mentioned here and was mentioned in that podcast, that what is real is what we think is real, and what you think is real, and what I think is real, what the wicked witch thought was real, any of us, is not the same as the truth. It's our thought created reality. It's what is real to us. It's our subjective reality. Yeah, you might say, well, of course it is, because that's how we're built. Yeah, I get all that. But when you look at it from the perspective of, we could be coming from a place of lack in looking at our reality, then if we can address that and come from a more secure place, which we already have, and this is why I mentioned this, that exists, we can come from that, then we're going to manage and cope much better. So let me go a little bit further. What was mentioned in that podcast was that when and that's where the mirror comes in, because the podcast was called All of Life is a Mirror, is that Piers Thurston was saying that life mirrors to us what's going on. And that's a great thing, because life is a mirror, and I get that. So situations occur in life and it mirrors to us what's going on. And there's a significant thing there, because I think what's being said in the podcast is that when we see what's going on, we're not really talking about the outside, because we can't, because from our perspective, from our kind of view on things, it's our view, not what's actually going on. That's what we mean by what we see as real. It's our perspective, our perception. That's the word I was looking for, perception. And of course it is. But the point was being made more subtly, I think, in the podcast, that, say an example was given, and it resonated with me. The example was given as that both of them are parents of young teenagers, and what they were talking about was, and by that both of them, I mean Amy Johnson and Piers Thurston, is that when they're trying to manage their children and put them on the right track and what have you. And sometimes that involves telling them off and correcting them, or even inquiring what they're doing. The point is being made, sorry about that, I do this, I bang my desk, I'll try not to do this, is that the point is being made that, of course, they're doing it to help the child, their children, but also, when you look at it a little bit more, how much are they trying to prove to themselves that they are good parents? So what's the motives here? And Piers actually made the point how clean, when we look at things, when we look in the mirror, how clean are we? And I think it's a really good point, because often we have a dog in the fight, as it were. In other words, we might be trying to help. I mean, I try to help my daughters, and I do that because I love them. I really do. And I help them. I'd lay down my life for them, obviously. But at the same time, I've got to look at my conscience and say, how much of that is also I'm trying to prove to myself, or show to myself and maybe to others, how good a father I am. And that's slightly different. So you are talking about here dealing with up in your head issues which are all psychologically based, and trying to get answers to problems like that. You know, how much should you tell them off or guide them or say this? When should you stay quiet? When are you doing it more because you're trying to bolster your own ego or your own position? And so but those are all abstract. And what is meant by that is they're abstract because they're not real. They're up in your head. They're just thoughts. When they are real to you, from that kind of personal perspective. When you look at it from the look at the other way, so get out of your head, get out of this what the mirror of life seems to be reflecting to you through your thought-based system. When you go before thought, in other words, you haven't got a dog in the fight, you haven't got a perception on it, a perspective on it, then what would happen there? Amy Johnson made a particular point of not even thinking about the situations that you get involved with to try and sort it out in your head. But for example, when something happens like that, when you have, say, a confrontation, or you want to manage your children or life or other people, how much are you kind of coming from, well, as I mentioned earlier, a clean space, but how much are you, what Amy was saying was, when you just go by your feeling about the whole situation. In other words, you could say, oh God, you know, my feeling about this is not very good. I'm tearing my hair out over my kids or over that person or this particular job I've got or my boss. But what Amy, I think, is saying is that is emotive. When she's saying, no, don't even go there, because it's the same really as thinking. With thinking, you are intellectualizing it, you are abstracting it, you are coming up with all your thoughts about the situation. And it's the same with when we are emoting. What Amy Johnson was saying there is, no, just feel it. Just be with the feeling. Just be there with it. And so if we look at, say, the thinking of it, instead of the going through the ifs, whats, shoulds and coulds of the situation that you have in life that is mirrored to you, if you just say, that is meant to happen. Okay, it's happened. If it's happened, it was meant to happen. So there's a bit of philosophy there, but sorry. What was made, yeah. And so what is being made there, and I'll come to the end now, I think, of this video, is that when you don't go there up in your head about it, go through your abstractions of it, or even with the feeling of it, you don't go into the emotions of it, you just stay with it. You see, what is going on is that when we go up into our head over it, we are kind of asking our mind, or we don't even have to ask our mind, because that's what our mind is doing. Our mind is there saying, look, you've got this situation, they're doing this, and this is, and she's doing that, and he's doing that, and your boss is doing that, and your life is doing this. Here's some solutions, because that's what your mind is doing. Your mind doesn't like what's going on and is trying to do something. Now, what I'm saying here, and obviously what they're teaching me here, I think, is that, no, it doesn't have the answers. In fact, if it did have the answers, you wouldn't be in that situation in the first place. And what they're saying is, it does not have the answers. And I suppose, as regards emotions, when you are screaming and kind of getting annoyed with life and banging your fists, you are, again, not facing the situation. You are, excuse me, you are, it's like a distraction, trying to not face the problem. Not face the problem by doing something about it. Now, I know that seems stupid, because you say, well, of course you should do it. But remember, what we're saying is that the mind really doesn't know what to do. It's got coming up with ideas, and when you're in a rage, your emotions don't know what to do. And what is happening there is that you are pushing against not liking what's happening, or not liking the feeling, or not liking the thought. If you come away from that and look in the opposite direction to all that type of thing, the emotions and all the thinking that's going on, to the isness of yourself, the beingness of yourself, the spirit of yourself, which is okay, right? So you are not looking in the direction of running around with solutions or getting emotive about it. Is that you are just kind of not doing that. What happens, and I think this is the secret, and it isn't a secret, it is what, I suppose what we're trying to do here is, it is the generation of our mind, is the developing of our mind. And the reason I say that is that we no matter what we come up with, we're still living we're still human. We're living in this this mind created environment in our head. But I'm not saying this correctly. Yeah, what I'm saying is that when we go away from that, those problems, that's the way we can evolve. That's what I was trying to get to. It's the evolvement of our mind around all this, even though it's a human mind and can only evolve so far, because we are still like fish in water. No matter what, no matter how evolved we are, we're still going to be in what I call the matrix of thought, or the matrix of emotions. But we can go so far to get more towards what I would call that truth beyond what we think is real. Now, that truth, we can't ever know what truth is, because we see everything through our human system. But there is a truth, because the reality that we see is not the truth. Now, what I'm saying is that when we go to what is within us, our oneness, our isness, our place inside, the God within us, if you want to call it like that. And I'm not religious here. I don't go to church, but I do believe that there is a God, or should I say, I believe there is something that is there. And it's this something that we have, and it's God-given, or it's there. I don't understand it. I don't need to understand it. I just know it's there. That's why we're all here. That's why the planet's here. That's why everything's here. When we move to that place, that's where we move closer to this truth instead of our reality. And that is why you'll start to, the more you start to go there, the more you start to see your problems or issues evaporate. And sometimes they just go poof. They just start disappearing. And it is no coincidence, and that this week I saw the Snow White and I listened to Amy Johnson's podcast, which deals with the mirror, as Disney did in Snow White. And there is such a thing as synchronicity. In other words, it's more than a coincidence. That happens at the level of the within us. And we get more towards that truth the more we go within, instead of being up in our headband, as it were, or our emotions. So yeah, that truth that we can move to, that actually for us starts to handle all that, so that all of a sudden, and when you live in that, instead of being up in the worrisomes, as it were, the angers, as it were, you'll find that life, because we can't reorganise life to suit us, but you'll find that you start, life starts mirroring to you better things. It seems to do that somehow. That's what I've noticed over the years, is that life mirrors to you the bad stuff, and the bad stuff is a gift because it tells you when you're up in your head or up in your emotions. And when it's the good stuff, that's what you're due, because that's what the world is reflecting back to you, and it reflects more back to you when you're more at that, what I would call soul level, inside level, God level, inner peace level, and that's where it happens. That's where the real leverage is, because when you come from that place, as I've said earlier, you're coming from a place of security, a place of okayness, and that's where you win the battles. You don't win the battles by looking at the situation from an ego point of, oh, who is the fairest of them all, because I'm obviously not. Well, I know I'm not the fairest of them all, but I do try my best. I hope that's been of some help to you. You take care. I hope to see you again. Thank you for listening.